During my lunch break, I found my husband and the neighbor in the bathtub together. So I locked the door, trapping them inside, and called her husband over. In the familiar chill of Seattle, I left the Lexus showroom in such a rush, I didn't even have time for lunch, realizing I had forgotten the most important file of the week. The contract of an elderly couple, both in their 80s, wanting to gift each of their 3 sons a Lexus 570 to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary. I was 6 months pregnant, my belly heavier by the day, and I just hoped to get home quickly, grab the file, and make it back in time for the 1:30 meeting. What I didn't know was that, just a few minutes later, my life would split into 2 distinct halves. Before that noon, and after that noon. My name is Allison, 35 years old, and as I drove into the quiet Woodridge neighborhood, the first thing that made my heart freeze was the sight of Michael's Tesla Model X parked right in front of our house. He had told me that morning he'd be in meetings downtown all through lunch. I didn't doubt him. But the car doesn't lie. A fine drizzle hung over Seattle, the driveway stained with wet patches, and the whole house was unnaturally silent. I walked in without turning on the lights. The window light was enough. But it wasn't the darkness that made me pause. It was the steam rising from the hallway leading to the master bedroom. The steam was so thick I could feel its warmth against my cheek. Then I heard the water. A loud, steady cascade echoing through the house, and mixed in with that sound was laughter. A woman's laugh, soft, thin, and sharp like a blade slicing through flesh. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just walked very slowly, step by step, toward the slightly ajar door of the master bathroom. Inside, through the misty heat, I saw Michael, my husband, and Jessica, our neighbor and his colleague, naked, wrapped around each other in the marble bathtub I had picked out myself when we renovated last year. That image seemed frozen in an endless moment, but my heart didn't pound the way I expected. It just stopped, as if every emotion had been ripped out of me all at once. I pulled the door closed and shut it with a single, cold click, turning the steel deadbolt Michael had installed himself, locking them inside. The sound of the water was still so loud that no one noticed. I left immediately, not a sound. I moved into another room, one hand on my belly, feeling my son kick gently, as if to remind me to stay calm. Then I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone. The first call was to Anthony, Jessica's husband. I spoke slowly, clearly. "You need to come here, right now, and don't forget to call Jessica's mom." I heard his breath catch, but I didn't ask anything more. The second call was to my father-in-law, Mr. Richard Badgley, founder of Badgley Capital, where both Michael and Jessica worked. "Come here now," I said. "The honor of the Badgley family is inside this house." After I hung up, I realized I was standing in Michael's office. My hands trembled slightly from the weight of the pregnancy, but my mind had never been clearer. I needed to know when the affair had started. I opened his laptop, logged in, and without hesitation, opened everything I thought needed opening. Then, as the screen came to life, I launched Microsoft Teams. As the messages began to scroll down like a reel of tape replaying my husband's parallel life, I knew what I saw in that bathtub was just the tip of the iceberg. The submerged part, that was what could truly destroy the life of a woman 6 months pregnant. And I was ready to uncover it. I pulled the chair closer to Michael's desk, adjusting my posture for comfort under the weight of a 6-month pregnancy, and then Jessica's messages appeared. Within 3 seconds, hundreds of messages flooded the screen, auto-loading like a rain of cold metal. The first thing that made me go still was the total absence of any work-related content. No marketing plans, no meeting schedules, no budget documents. Just messages between the two of them spanning 14 months, ranging from flirtatious banter to mid-workday rendezvous, and even laughter at my trust. I scrolled down, my eyes stopping on a message Michael sent to Jessica last October. She really is an easy fool to trick. No emoji. No subtlety. just a raw sentence, sharp like a finely honed blade. I blinked several times, but the words remained clear, unblurred. No part of me wanted to cry. On the contrary, my entire body turned cold to the point where I felt 10 times more lucid than usual. I continued into the Campaign Q4 folder on his desktop. At the Lexus showroom, I was used to reading spreadsheets all day, so it only took a few seconds to spot something off. The Excel file opened, and right in the vendor payments section was the name that sent a chill down my spine: Northbridge Media LLC. Owner Michael Badgley and Jessica Holtz. I stared at the two names side by side, as if physical betrayal wasn't enough. They had conspired to steal money from Michael's own father, Badgley Capital, one of Seattle's major investment firms. The money trail was as clear as blood on a white background: $2,312,450 withdrawn from the marketing fund, broken into dozens of payments labeled advertising, events, digital strategy, all funneled into Northbridge Media LLC's account. No real invoices, no real campaigns. I placed my hand gently on my belly, feeling Oliver shifting inside. I whispered, "It's okay, baby. Mommy is seeing the truth now." Then I opened the folder Property Photos. And even though I was prepared, my heart still dropped a beat. They had photographed a luxury apartment in South Lake Union. Full-height glass windows, direct view of Rainy Park, gray-white paint scheme, Scandinavian design. In one photo, Michael held a measuring tape against the living room wall, while Jessica smiled, her hand resting on his chest, as if they were picking a nest for their new family. At the bottom of the folder, I found a Word file, plainly named Plan.docs. I opened it. The first line appeared like a verdict already written for me. Divorce next month. M keeps assets. Don't let Allison take anything. Not divide the assets. Not negotiate. But don't let me take anything. I leaned back in the chair, not from shock, but from the feeling that a door had opened in my mind. A door not leading to sorrow, but to a clarity I had never known before. Michael hadn't just betrayed me. He had betrayed the unborn child of his own blood. And I, with a strange calm now spreading through me, understood that from this moment on, I was no longer the betrayed wife. I was the one holding evidence that could destroy not just a career, but an entire $2.3 million corruption scheme they had built together. I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and felt Oliver kick again, as if he were saying, "Keep going, Mommy, we're just getting started." The doorbell rang just as I closed the laptop. Not a normal ring, but the kind you hold down, long and tense, full of urgency and dread. I stood up, moving slowly under the weight of my pregnant belly, and opened the door. Anthony was standing there, rain dripping down his face, pale, but his eyes blazing with a fury I had never seen in someone usually so gentle. "Allison," he panted, shoulders still trembling, "you said I should come right away, so I drove straight here from Tacoma. What's going on?" I didn't let him guess. I stepped aside so he could see directly down the hallway, where steam still drifted from the master bedroom. His gaze sharpened, then darkened. He understood. Sometimes men only need a glance to know exactly what's happening behind a closed door. I gestured for him to come in. As Anthony stepped inside, he paused for a moment as if he needed to hold himself together to keep from smashing everything in sight. I said nothing. I simply reopened Michael's laptop and turned the screen toward him. "Look," I said. Anthony leaned down and stared at the screen. It only took a few seconds for him to see the cheating messages, the midday hookups, and the way Jessica referred to me as his wife, with a thinly veiled contempt. Then he scrolled further. He saw the photos. He saw the Excel file. And finally, he saw the Plan.docx file, with its opening line staring him in the face. Divorce next month. M keeps assets. Don't let Allison take anything. Anthony froze, bracing himself against the desk like he needed something to hold on to. I saw his chest heave like someone had punched the air out of him. For a long moment, he said nothing. No cursing. just stared at the screen like it was the hardest slap of his life. Eventually, he clenched his fists so tight, the bones rose white under his skin, and spoke in a low, steel-edged voice. "We're not opening that door!" A breath. "They need to pay for this." I looked at Anthony, not as an ally, but as someone who had lost everything and still managed to hold on to a shred of dignity. I nodded. Slow, clear, and without a trace of hesitation. "Okay," I said, "but we have to be smart." Anthony looked at me, and for the first time in this betrayal-soaked afternoon, his expression shifted from fury to something cold, clear, calculating, like he had just changed roles, from betrayed husband to a man stepping into battle. "Do you have a plan?" he asked. I pointed toward the bathroom, where light was still spilling out from under the door. "Listen, they're still laughing." Anthony tilted his head. And sure enough, the water, Jessica's giggles, Michael's murmurs, they all rang out like a mockery inside the house I once thought was safe. "All right," Anthony said, gripping the strap of his coat. "We strike back, softly, but cruelly enough that they'll never forget it." I walked over to the desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small device, something Michael had once bought to intimidate a late kitchen repairman, a small black Bluetooth speaker with powerful output. I placed it on the table and looked at Anthony. "You know what sound scares a person most when they're doing something dirty?" I asked. Anthony raised an eyebrow. I gave a soft laugh and opened YouTube. Chainsaw sound, 150 decibels. Anthony looked at me like I had just handed him a sword in the dark. "Allison," he said, voice low, "I think today is the day Michael and Jessica will never forget." I looked toward the locked bathroom door, and for the first time since stepping into this house, I no longer felt like the passive one. "Let's begin," I said. And we began to plan, gently but mercilessly. Anthony held the Bluetooth speaker like it was some high-grade demolition tool. I opened YouTube on my phone, typed into the search bar, "Chainsaw sound 150 decibels." Within seconds, the results popped up, dozens of screaming saws, each one loud enough to jolt the heart of any grown adult. We walked up to the bathroom door, still locked from the outside, steam leaking from underneath. Laughter, whispers, splashing water still sounding from within, completely unaware of what was coming. Anthony placed the speaker on the floor, right up against the base of the door, like he was planting an audio landmine. I looked at him. He looked at me. Just a small nod. I hit play on the first video. Boom! The chainsaw roared through the hallway, metal grinding against metal, howling like a mechanical beast had just been unleashed. Anthony winced at the sudden volume, and I leaned forward to crank it up to max. He gave me a side glance filled with something like respect. "Damn," he whispered. The sound was so loud the framed pictures on the wall began to tremble, and I could feel Oliver, my son, kick lightly inside, startled but not in pain. I placed my hand on my belly to reassure him, then stepped back so Anthony could take position. He inhaled once, then roared with a force I'd never heard from him before, a primal release of months of repressed rage. 10 seconds, or I'll cut this door down! His voice thundered down the hallway, loud enough that if we opened the windows, half of Seattle might have heard. A second later, from inside the bathroom, came high-pitched screams, from both Michael and Jessica. Mixed in were the sounds of water splashing wildly, something slamming against the tub, slipping, panicked shrieking like they truly believed someone was out there revving a chainsaw, ready to break down the door. "Michael, what is that?" Jessica's voice shrill. "Oh my God! Oh my God! Is someone in the house?" I leaned against the wall, hand over my mouth, not to cry, but to suppress a laugh. Anthony turned toward me, eyes wide, face saying, "They actually bought it." We looked at each other, silent, but somehow bonded in this absurd, tragic comedy. No more words were needed, no more plans required. Just one look, and we both knew. We were exactly where we needed to be, not as victims, but as the ones who now controlled the storm. I drew in a breath, feeling the soft twitch of Oliver beneath my palm, and whispered, "This is just the prelude, baby." Anthony gave a slight nod. And the chainsaw kept roaring, tearing through the fake peace those two had built behind that locked bathroom door, clearing the way for the most humiliating escape of their lives in the next act. The chainsaw sound kept roaring like it was ripping the entire hallway to shreds, and just as I finished saying, "This is just the prelude, baby," a loud crash came from inside the bathroom, so loud Anthony flinched. Then Michael's voice screamed, "Jessica, climb, just climb, go, go, go!" Followed by a sharp scream, definitely Jessica's. They truly believed the door would be cut down at any second. Part of me wanted to laugh, but another part stood still, calm, watchful, recording the moment for the rest of my life. Anthony motioned for me to step back, then shifted to the side. He had correctly guessed what was coming. I heard the bathroom window fling open, Michael groan from slipping, Jessica shouting, "Don't look down!" And then, boom! Michael fell first. Not a single stitch on him, no covering, no dignity. Right into the giant rose bush I planted last year. Seattle roses are beautiful, but their thorns are steel needle sharp. He jumped up, hopping, hands covering himself, yelping like he'd been stung by a swarm of bees. A second later, boom again. Jessica landed right beside him, also stark naked, wet hair plastered to her face, and her scream sliced the air like a 3 a.m. fire alarm. "My skin! Oh God! The thorns! Michael, do something!" Michael turned to help her, but stepped directly onto another thorny branch, launching him off the ground with a scream so pitiful Anthony had to cover his mouth to keep from laughing aloud. The two of them scrambled across the lawn, clutching front and back, shrieking like hunted animals, when headlights suddenly flooded the yard. Anthony and I turned. A Mercedes GLS pulled up at the gate. The door opened. Richard Badgley stepped out, cashmere coat, scarf, the gait of a man who'd commanded billions in his lifetime. He had only come to see what emergency I had mentioned. But what he saw was his son, completely naked, stumbling across the lawn like a dazed duck. He froze. No blinking, no words, no heavy breathing. His tanned face turned a sickly pale that I knew Michael would never forget. Before anyone could react, a second car pulled up behind. A well-dressed, petite woman stepped out, Jessica's mother. She looked around, spotted Michael first, then Jessica, and then realized both of them were completely naked, save for the red lashings of thorn scratches. She let out a piercing scream, sharp as shattering glass. "Jessica! What? What are you? Oh my God! Oh God!" And instantly, her knees gave out. She collapsed onto the wet lawn, clutching her chest, eyes wide with horror. No one ran to help her. Not Michael, not Jessica, no one. Because both of them were far too busy, covering themselves, dodging thorns, and running from the life they had chosen. Anthony looked at me. I looked at Anthony. No discussion, no words. We were ready for the next stage. Anthony and I hadn't even moved from where we stood when my phone started vibrating repeatedly, not once, but 3 times in a row, like the whole neighborhood was suddenly focused on my house. At first, I thought they were just casual messages, but when I opened the Ring Neighborhood app, I saw a flood of notifications. Motion detected, front yard. Motion detected, driveway. Motion detected, side yard, unusual activity. And just as I had predicted, neighbors had heard the screaming and crashing from my house 5 to 6 minutes earlier. In the quiet suburbs of Seattle, all it takes is a loud boom or a panic-filled scream to make people snap on their cameras. One neighbor in the Ring group messaged first, "Anyone else hearing shouting near Allison's place?" Immediately, 2 other neighbors rewound their footage to review the motion alerts. And within seconds, on my screen appeared 6 different Ring cameras. 6, each from a different angle. capturing the full spectacle of Michael and Jessica's naked escape, their fall into the rosebush, and their frantic scramble through the yard like two hunted deer. Mrs. Hanson's left-angle camera caught Michael clutching his privates and hopping across the front lawn. The Perkins camera captured Jessica nearly slipping over a hose on the concrete. The Lee family's overhead camera looked like it was broadcasting a live soccer match. I looked at Anthony. He looked at me. We didn't say a word, but our eyes both said, "Oh my God, this is beyond anything we imagined." Then came the first text from a neighbor in the Ring group. Why are two people naked running around Allison's yard?" Another replied instantly, "Someone check on Allison. This looks bad." I nearly laughed. But before I could do anything else, another notification popped up. "Uploading to TikTok. This is wild." I froze. I knew what was happening, but I didn't expect it to happen this fast. Like someone was editing a short film in my front yard. 3 minutes later, I received the first TikTok, sent by Tiffany, the 17-year-old girl from next door. The title flashed across the screen. Suburban Naked Olympics, Seattle Edition. The video opened with Michael sprinting out of the rosebush, face scrunched like he'd been stung by bees. The middle showed Jessica fumbling to cover the front, then the back, then the front again as the wind blew. The finale, the masterpiece, was Mr. Richard Badgley standing frozen, and Jessica's mother collapsing to the lawn like a scene straight out of a soap opera. Anthony's jaw dropped watching the video. So wide I thought he might choke on air. "Allison, oh God, this is going to explode online." And it did. Just 6 hours after posting, the video hit. 11 million views. My phone kept lighting up with notifications. Your post has been mentioned in a trending topic. Local Seattle residents are commenting on a viral video near your neighborhood. I opened Reddit. First post on the front page, /Seattle. What did I just watch in Bellevue? Another user commented, "This is why I always keep my Ring cameras on." Plot twist, the real victim is the rosebush. Then came Nextdoor, the neighborhood drama app that rivals any soap opera. A woman named Marsha wrote, "Anyone know who those naked runners were? Should we call the cops?" Someone else replied, "Not the cops, call Netflix." I stood in the living room, hand on my belly, and felt Oliver give a sudden hard kick, like he was reacting to the noise of the internet himself. Anthony looked at me, letting out a half-shocked, half-satisfied sigh. "Allison, they just destroyed their own reputations, and we haven't even lifted a finger." I gave a faint smile. "That was just the natural consequence," I replied. "The real consequences haven't even started." Reddit and Nextdoor were overflowing with comments, and I stood there in the living room, feeling like I had just witnessed a social media typhoon form in a matter of hours. But I knew. Going viral was just the entertainment aftermath. The real consequences, the ones Michael and Jessica never saw coming, lay in the law. I looked at Anthony. Kimberly, the best lawyer in Seattle, is a regular client of mine. "I'll try reaching out to her," I said. Anthony nodded. "But it's late. Offices are probably closed by now." I checked the time. 8:12 p.m. True, no lawyers worked this late unless they were handling something hot. But Kimberly Santos wasn't an ordinary attorney. I picked up my phone and texted, "Kimberly, I've got 2 divorce cases I need you on." 2 minutes later, my phone chimed with her reply. "Nothing over text. Be at my office by 9 a.m. I'll clear my morning for this." The next morning, Seattle was cold and misty. Anthony and I drove to Kimberly Santos's office, located in a glass tower in South Lake Union, surrounded by law firms, tech companies, and investment funds, all crowding the same street. Her office sat on the 14th floor, with full glass walls overlooking the lake. Just the setting alone told you she wasn't a regular lawyer. As we walked in, Kimberly was standing at a whiteboard, marking cases by file code. She turned as soon as she heard the door. Kimberly was about 40, slim but strong, wearing a charcoal suit, her eyes sharp like someone who saw through your words before you finished your sentence. "Allison, Anthony, she said, her voice warm but firm. Sit down. Show me everything. I opened the laptop and placed it in front of her. Anthony handed over his phone, packed with clips, photos, texts, spreadsheets, and accounting files. Kimberly didn't react emotionally. She read, scanning fast like her brain had its own processor, and scrolled through each section with precise taps. When she reached the Excel file for Northbridge Media LLC, she raised an eyebrow, her face cold as Puget Sound wind. $2.3 million? A breath. Then a small smile, the smile of someone who knew they were about to win big. That's enough, she said, voice as sharp as a blade. More than enough to bring both of them to criminal court. Anthony exhaled, like he had finally found the right person to entrust his fury to. But Kimberly wasn't done. She snapped the laptop shut with precision, stood up, walked to her desk, and pulled out 2 yellow file folders. Allison, she said, locking eyes with me, you being 6 months pregnant doesn't just help you in the divorce. It raises the severity of the financial fraud charges against Michael. And Jessica? She's an accomplice. These 2 won't just lose their jobs. They'll be criminally investigated. Then she turned to Anthony. And you don't need to fight, argue, or scream. All you have to do is sign. Anthony nodded. I'll sign everything. Kimberly opened her laptop and began firing off documents. 1 copy to the Seattle Economic Crime Unit. 1 to Badgley Capital's internal audit team, where Michael's father sits as founder. 1 for Allison's divorce filing, marked as urgent due to pregnancy. I want them to receive these in 5 minutes, Kimberly said, her fingers tapping like a pianist across the keyboard. And trust me, once the auditors open that Excel file, Michael and Jessica will have no jobs, no reputation, and no financial future. I placed my hand on my belly, feeling Oliver stirred gently inside. Kimberly looked at me, her gaze softening slightly. Allison, I've handled hundreds of divorces, dozens of fraud cases, but a 6-month pregnant woman collecting her own evidence, locking the bathroom, then exposing a $2.3 million corruption ring? She smiled proudly. You don't have to worry about anything. From here on, let me handle it. I nodded, quiet but firm. And I knew. This was no longer just my personal story. This was a real case, a real war. And I had chosen the right ally. Act 2.7. Immediate consequences. 32 minutes to 36 minutes. It took exactly 32 minutes after Kimberly sent the files for Anthony's phone to buzz. He checked the screen, then handed it to me. A message from a familiar employee inside Badgley Capital. Michael just got called into an emergency meeting. The audit team's already convened. Something's about to go down. My heart didn't race, but I felt something unfamiliar, like justice was walking toward us on steady legs. Less than an hour later, another buzz. I received an auto-CC'd email from Badgley Capital because I was still listed as family to heir Michael Badgley. Subject line, termination notice, effective immediately. I opened it. The first line glowed clearly in the gray Seattle morning. Michael Badgley is terminated effective immediately due to severe breach of fiduciary duty and financial misconduct. Anthony let out a soft breath, like a weight had been lifted from his chest. I looked up and saw his eyes red, but steady. Finally, he said. But that wasn't all. Right after the termination notice, 2 more system notifications popped up. Revocation of equity ownership. Suspension of heirship privileges, pending legal review. Meaning, Michael's shares, completely revoked. His inheritance rights, immediately suspended. And the final blow, the one I knew would crush him more than the TikTok, came from his own father. A phone call from Richard Badgley. His voice was cold, firm, and without hesitation. Allison, I've seen enough. Today, I'm updating the will. Everything I have left will go to my grandson, Oliver. I gripped the chair arm, knees nearly giving out from the shock. Mr. Richard, No need to say anything, he cut me off. Michael chose his path. I choose to protect the innocent child. I bowed my head, tears streaming, but not from weakness. It was the feeling of seeing a piece of truth in my life finally set back into its rightful place. 2 weeks later, at exactly 12:47 p.m., Kimberly texted me. Jessica Holtz has been formally charged. She's placed under home confinement pending trial. Attached was a screenshot from the King County Public Records System. I looked at Jessica's photo, pale, swollen-eyed, disheveled, and I didn't feel triumphant. I only felt a hollow, quiet end. Can a person really destroy their life that fast? Just through ambition and desire? Anthony came over and handed me a glass of water. Allison, he said, this is just the beginning, but they're already living the consequences of their own choices. I placed my hand on my belly. Oliver kicked again, this time stronger than usual, as if he knew today marked the first moment of safety in his life. I smiled. Let's keep going. Act 2.8. The pottery class and the 70-year-old mentor, 36 minutes to 39 minutes. 7 days later, when the full legal consequences were rolling forward like an unstoppable train, I stood alone in the living room, a space once filled with laughter, family dinners, and lies that had seeped in slowly like ink on white paper. I looked around one last time, took a long breath, and signed the sale contract to a cash buyer. I sold the house. Not because I liked change, but because I wanted to sever every thread Michael had ever touched. That afternoon, I wheeled my suitcase, placed a hand on my belly, and stepped into the lobby of the Fairmont Olympic Hotel, Seattle, where the scent of oak wood and white orchids made me feel like I was stepping into an entirely new life. The receptionist handed me the keycard with a polite smile, but in her eyes there was a silent nod, an acknowledgement for a woman who had just walked out of the ashes. I entered the room, opened the window to the old trees swaying in the Seattle breeze, and set down my suitcase. For the first time in weeks, I exhaled deeply. That evening, I signed up for a pottery class at a studio 4 blocks from the hotel. A small room with olive green walls, the scent of damp clay, and the gentle hum of spinning wheels like distant heartbeats. I chose a wheel near the window, placed a lump of dark brown clay at the center, and placed my hands on it. For the first time, the silence didn't scare me. As I watched the spinning clay swirl beneath my palms, a warm, husky voice spoke beside me. You're spinning too fast. Controlling the wheel is like controlling life. Don't let it drag you. I turned. An elderly woman, around 70, with wavy silver hair, pale blue eyes, and an old but clean pottery apron. She smiled, the kind of smile someone wears after living through more than they care to say. My name's Nora, she said. I nodded. Allison. She glanced at my belly before meeting my eyes. Not with curiosity, not with pity, just understanding. I got divorced at 60, she said, as casually as noting the weather. After 38 years of patient foolishness. I stayed silent. She continued shaping the clay in front of her, hands bony but strong. You think you've lost everything, don't you? I didn't answer, but my eyes surely had. Nora tilted her head, looking straight through me, as though she could see the armor I'd spent days trying to keep on. What you've actually been given is your life back, she said. It's just that, right now, you can't see all of it. Her words touched something inside me, like a thread gently pulling apart the cocoon I'd wrapped around myself. I looked down, placed my hands on the clay again, not to steady it, but to shape it. Will you teach me? I asked. Nora smiled, eyes crinkling like afternoon sunlight on a lake. No, you'll teach yourself. I'll just stand nearby, to remind you that women never really fall. We just rebuild. I spun the wheel, and the clay began to rise into a soft vase form. I silently named it Phoenix Mother, a mother rising again from the ashes. And I knew my life truly began in that moment. Act 2.9. 3 months later. Rebirth. 39 to 44. 3 months later, Seattle had stepped into early spring. The air still cold, but the light lingered longer, just enough to stream through the hospital window on the morning I gave birth. I remember every detail: the smell of antiseptic, the sound of the fetal heart monitor, the nurse gripping my hand through the worst of the pain. And amid all that chaos, when the first cry rang out, I felt like my life had just been reset. Oliver Richard Badgley, my son, red, tiny, but his little hand gripped my finger with such force I nearly cried. Oliver! That's his name. Middle name Richard, to honor the only man in the Badgley bloodline who stood by us, and Badgley, the family name I never truly belonged to, until the moment my son was laid in my arms. When we returned to the hotel a few days later, I received a secure email from Richard's lawyer. Just 4 lines, but enough to change Oliver's future. Per updated will, all assets, equity, and inheritance rights of the Badgley family are transferred to a trust fund in the name of Oliver Richard Badgley. Not a portion, not a percentage, all of it. I sat in silence for a long time, not because of the money, but because of what it meant. It wasn't just wealth, it was recognition, protection, redemption from a grandfather who believed his grandson might bring something pure into his family. A few weeks later, once Oliver was stronger, I received an official invitation, a white envelope sealed with gold. On behalf of the Badgley family, we respectfully invite Allison Ray Carter to join the board of the Badgley Foundation. I held the paper in both hands. I never imagined I'd be asked to sit at the table where community projects, scholarships, and statewide education grants were decided. But then I realized I had changed. Oliver had changed me. I no longer lived defensively. I was building. One late afternoon, after my first board meeting, I returned to the new penthouse, a home I had curated with intention, detail, and light. 19th floor, overlooking Lake Union, where the water and floating homes shimmered in a lavender-orange sunset like a living painting. Oliver's room was white and sky blue walls, sheer curtains for soft light, a mobile of tiny whales spinning above, and a walnut rocking chair where I sat each night, holding him and whispering, "You came to restart my life." I lifted Oliver, rested his cheek on my shoulder, and looked out over the lake as the wind pushed gentle ripples toward shore. 3 months ago, I thought my life was in ruins. But it turns out, I was being reborn, with my son, into something more beautiful than I'd imagined. Act 2.10. The Fall of the Betrayers. 44 minutes to 50 minutes. But somewhere out there, the storm for Michael and Jessica was only beginning. The next morning, as I was nursing Oliver, Kimberly sent me an email update. The subject line was cold as steel: Badgley v. Holtz, Civil and Criminal Proceedings Update. I opened it, and the first line cut straight into the fate of the 2 traitors. Michael and Jessica had officially turned on each other and lost everything. Michael claimed Jessica seduced him. Jessica claimed Michael coerced her. They squabbled like children fighting over a broken toy. But the law didn't care. Evidence from the laptop, the messages, the bank accounts, all pointed to one thing: co-conspirators. That very day, Michael received the final notice from Badgley Capital. He was permanently terminated, equity revoked, inheritance rights fully stripped, no chance for appeal, no room for negotiation. Richard Badgley had stamped the decision I believe he'd long wanted to make. Michael's reputation in Seattle's marketing scene evaporated within hours. Colleagues who once slapped him on the back at every party now watched the Suburban Naked Olympics, Seattle edition video, as their evening entertainment. He had no luxury condo to move into with Jessica. He had to rent a dingy studio in Capitol Hill, where every late-night grocery run was accompanied by whispers, "That's the guy from Allison's Roses!" Jessica, meanwhile, sank into a pit she once thought she was too clever to reach. The court sentenced her to 18 months probation, under home confinement, not allowed to leave Seattle without judicial permission, and worse, she was ordered to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in restitution to Badgley Capital. I read the Seattle Times article Kimberly forwarded. The photo of Jessica showed a woman unrecognizable. Swollen eyes, tangled hair, a ghost of the confident person who once walked into my life to tear it apart. I felt no joy, no vindication, only a deep and clear image of someone unraveling. Not long after, Anthony messaged me. They broke up, screamed at each other all morning. Jessica blamed Michael for the Ring cameras. Michael blamed Jessica for the shell company. Phone shattered on the floor. I read the text without a flicker of satisfaction. I just felt one cold truth. Anything built on lies will always collapse from within. While they screamed, blamed, and shredded each other to pieces, I was holding Oliver, kissing his forehead, watching Lake Union glow under the gentle afternoon light like a soft painting. They stood at the end of a broken road. And I was at the beginning of a brand new life. Like, subscribe, share this story with every woman you love. Because maybe, just maybe, it'll reach them at the exact moment they need it. Just like Allison found her own story at exactly the right time.